Hello, this is Brooklyn Franklin and Alec Roach with the Linton-Stockton Student Press, and we're here with Greene County prosecutor Jarrod Holtsclaw. It's very nice for you to be able to speak with us.
Sure, I'm honored to do so.
So, why did you want to become Greene County prosecutor?
When I went to college a long time ago, back in the 90s, I really had no idea what a prosecutor did. I went to IU to go to study business and went through the business school. But while I was there, I became interested in the possibility of going on to law school after I graduated. Again, more with an idea of going into corporate law or business law. When I graduated from IU in 1995, I did apply and was admitted to IU School of Law at Bloomington. And once there, I took some courses on criminal law and criminal procedure. I was very interested in those classes. And then I had a friend at the time who worked with the state police, and he suggested I come home and work at the prosecutor's office as an intern my first summer after my first year in law school. And I did that. Walked into this building having no idea what a prosecutor did still, but I was just anxious to have a job in the legal field. And after that first summer, I walked away thinking there's nothing else I want to do but be a prosecutor. It was so interesting. Every day is different. You get to help, the people that you grew up with, your community, your county. I was from Greene County, born and raised here in Bloomfield, and it was just a tremendous experience. So when I went back, I focused my legal studies on criminal justice issues, criminal justice courses, continued to work as a law clerk here in the prosecutor's office, and then I was fortunate enough when I graduated that there was a job opening as a deputy prosecutor here. I took that position, worked 8 years as a deputy prosecutor. When my boss retired, I ran for the elected prosecutor position, and I've held that job ever since.
So I guess you kind of answered it being that you wanted to become, that you didn't really know what a prosecutor did, but what made you decide to be a prosecutor when you could have been a defending attorney?
Quite honestly, I feel like I'm on the right side of the law now, and that's not to disparage any defense attorneys because they have a role in the criminal justice system. But as a prosecutor, you are protecting victims, you are upholding the rule of law, making sure that everybody follows the law, because if we don't, we can't have a society. So I feel like whenever I come to work every day, I'm helping to not only make sure our citizens are safe, but also upholding the rules that all of us need to follow.
Since you grew up in this area, what are some memories that you have as a child?
How long is this interview supposed to be? Memories as a child. I had a great childhood growing up here in Bloomfield. My dad went to Eastern. My mom went to Bloomfield. I have family throughout this county. Interest as a child, hunting, fishing, played lots of baseball. Played some basketball. I think when I went away to school and saw, lived outside of Greene County, lived in Bloomington for 7 years, and realized that not everybody had the ability to grow up on a farm and be able to go fishing at a creek or go hunting whenever I wanted to, or have a bunch of close-knit friends. A lot of the people I met in college went to high schools that had, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 kids in it, which are, that's greater than the population of Bloomfield. So was fortunate to grow up in a small community, just like Bloomfield, just like Linton, and have a lot of good relationships and teachers who knew me, knew my family, and were able to look out for our best interests. So I felt blessed to grow up in this area and had a lot of good memories.
So growing up and kind of into your college years, what impression did lawyers have on you?
When I mentioned to Brooklyn earlier that I had no idea what a prosecutor meant, that was the truth. But keep in mind, back in the 80s, whenever I was growing up, there weren't all of these law enforcement type shows or movies. Nowadays, if you wanted to go home every evening, you could watch some sort of story about what a police officer or what a prosecutor does. It wasn't the same thing when I grew up. I was fortunate enough that I wasn't in trouble with the law growing up. My family wasn't in trouble with the law, but what exactly again were you asking about? Let's do that one again.
What kind of impression did lawyers and kind of the justice system have on you?
Okay. impression about lawyers in the justice system. Growing up, I didn't have an exposure to the justice system. There weren't as many law enforcement type TV shows or attorney shows on TV as there are now. The impression that I have was more formulated once I got to law school, and it's a little bit different than what I've actually experienced coming home and practicing. When you go through law school, the impression you get is that it is a very cutthroat type business. There's a lot of competition to get a job as an attorney, and that it's difficult to form close relationships with your colleagues, that your main concern is your client only. That hasn't been my experience in practice. In practice, I've formed lots of relationships with not only other prosecutors but also defense attorneys. It's been, while the job is demanding at times, I wouldn't call it cutthroat. I've been able to not only be an attorney, be a prosecutor, but I've also been able to coach almost every year since I've graduated, either baseball or basketball. I'm raising a family, and I have time for my family as well. So it's the impressions of being an attorney, and perhaps it's different if you're in a big city, but I've been able to still have a career here, but also balance that with having a life outside of the career. And that's a little bit different than the impression that was given to me back when I first went into law school.
So were there any, like, you said you were, I can't look for the word, but you were here before you became prosecutor. Were there any specific cases or attorneys that you encountered that made you think even more, like support even more that you want to become a prosecutor?
As I mentioned before, Brooklyn, I really didn't have exposure to the criminal justice system before I went to law school, but I do remember a case, actually a couple of cases whenever I was younger, that sort of made an impression about why I wanted to be a prosecutor. One of which was when an owner of Holtsclaw Standard gas station was killed, Milford Holtsclaw. He was killed during a burglary. I was camping out with a friend that night. I think I was 12 or 13 years old, and I heard the sirens. The next morning, parents told me that what had happened here at the gas station across from our baseball diamond here in Bloomfield, and that made an impact on me. That even in a small town, somebody could be killed just defending their home and their property. Another case I remember was the Cindy Lou Mason murder in Linton. It was during a 4th of July weekend at Linton when you all had the carnival, and she was taken to the Stone House and killed during a part of some sick ritual. And I was young when that took place, but again, I did not forget that the feeling that you can just be taken from somewhere and killed. And that investigation took a while, and those trials took a while. So those are some of the things that I thought back to whenever I was making my decision to go to law school, and more specifically, even the decision to be a prosecutor instead of a defense attorney.
You graduated out of Indiana University and Indiana University School of Law, magna cum laude and cum laude. You could have gone up to much higher things. Why exactly did you stay in Greene County?
That's a good question, and it's one I've been asked before. The question about why I didn't go on to bigger and better things, I don't know that there's anything better than the career I've had here. I mean, I understand what you're asking, and yes, I could have gone to Indianapolis, or I could have gone to Chicago like a lot of my friends and probably made more money, but I don't necessarily know that the quality of my life would have been any better than what it's been here. I'm married to a wonderful woman. I've got a son that I adore, and as I mentioned, I think to Alec, is my job time consuming? Very. I mean, I'm on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but I'm also able to do pretty much what I want, if I'm not in court or if I'm not having to work on an investigation, and I love this area. Obviously, I moved back here after college when I could have gone elsewhere, so I may have been able to go to bigger places and make more money, but I don't necessarily know that I could have gone to a better place for me. As I mentioned earlier, I've hunted and fished since I was young. I'm still able to do that. It'd be tough to do in downtown Indianapolis or downtown Chicago. I love baseball and basketball. I've been able to coach those sports, not only my own son, but a number of kids throughout the county over the years. Not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily been able to do that had I gone to a bigger city. So bigger, yeah, I could have moved on to bigger things, maybe better things. I don't know. I think what I'm doing is best for me.
So there are many different cases a prosecutor could deal with. Are there any kind of recurring problems that you see in Greene County?
Yeah, and I'll try to be brief because we could talk a lot about the recurring problems. Top on the list is substance abuse. I just had a meeting the other day with the Attorney General who was here in my office, and one of the things that we discussed, and it's not just an issue in Greene County, it's an issue all across the state and probably all across the country, but if we could eliminate the abuse of alcohol and drugs in our community, my caseload would be cut 75%, maybe as much as 90%, because even though not every case is a drug possession case or a drunk driving case, if you look at the root of why the person committed the crime, almost always you can find somebody that has abused alcohol or drugs. So, that drives a number of cases. It drives domestic batteries, it drives thefts, it drives burglaries, it drives a whole host of things besides just your typical drug and alcohol offenses. So in terms of recurring problems, that's a big one, substance abuse. Another big problem that we have in this community is that the lack of good paying jobs. I feel like if we had a better, if our economy was a little better here, perhaps there would be people that had a little bit better opportunity to keep a job, to get a good job, keep a good job, and maybe wouldn't fall into the trap of abusing substances, and again could keep out of the criminal justice system. So if I were to talk about a third issue, perhaps might be breakdown of the family. There are a number of times we deal with juveniles, and then also as they get older and become adults, we deal with individuals that simply, perhaps if they had a more stable family, a better upbringing, they wouldn't have gotten into certain things that led them to get in trouble with the criminal justice system. So that's an issue too. And again, these aren't specific just to Greene County. These are issues that prosecutors and judges and law enforcement officials across the state and across the country are dealing with. But the number one issue is probably substance abuse. Again, alcohol and drug related offenses.
How do you hope to see these problems fixed, specifically kind of the substance abuse thing?
Wow, if I had the answer to fix that, Alec, I would have done that 19 years ago when I started. But one thing you have to realize there is we provide people with the opportunity to seek treatment on a number of cases. Now, if you're talking about a serious drug dealer, those people are going to go to prison. But one of the misconceptions is that we send everybody to jail or prison. There are a lot of times we prosecute individuals for alcohol abuse or for possession of controlled substances, and yeah, they might have to serve a little bit of time in jail, but our main focus is getting them on probation and getting them into a treatment program so that they can become clean and learn ways to help overcome their addictions. Because if we don't do that, if you don't try to attack the addiction, whatever time you sentence them to, when they get out, they're going to go right back to the drug or to the alcohol of choice. We've tried that. We'll continue to try that, but the problem lies in the fact that if somebody has a substance abuse addiction, if they don't want to take it upon themselves to take advantage of the treatment and try to make a change in their own life, I can't force them to do that. So they may go through the motions, but when they get out, if they're not serious about staying sober, they're going to fall back into the same activities and same behaviors, and we end up dealing with them again. So we will continue to try to provide treatment options as well as short or long-term incarceration, depending on the person's situation. But they will have to make a decision about whether it's time in their life to take their treatment seriously. In terms of the other issues, the breakdown of the family specifically, that's a situation, again, prosecutors, police officers, judges don't really have control over. It would have to be incumbent upon somebody in that person's family to step up and provide the guidance that maybe a mother or father that they don't have would have provided. So again, those are things that I wish I had control over, but I don't.
Are there any specific problems you see in teenagers in Greene County?
No specific problems, or no problems that would only be specific to Greene County, but the issues that we see with teenagers have kind of changed over the years since I started, And the reason I say that is because technology has changed since I started. Keep in mind, my first year as a deputy prosecutor was 1998, and I didn't have a cell phone. In fact, I think only the elected prosecutor had one, and it was this huge bag phone that was cumbersome to drag around, and he only took it when they went out of town. Nowadays, kids have access to all kinds of technology. So if you'd asked me this question in 1998, I would say, well, yeah, the problems we have with teenagers nowadays are they're drinking before they turn 21. Some of them are experimenting with drugs when they clearly shouldn't. Now, yes, we still have those issues, but we also have so much more. We have kids who are being bullied online or bullying people online. We deal with that issue. Another issue we deal with frequently is the exchange of nude photographs between teenagers online, which is a huge problem. There also seems to be more, and this may fall under the bullying, or maybe a little bit broader than that, but issues with kids threatening other people or threatening schools or other facilities online. So I would say overall there are more issues, and it's probably a little bit tougher to be a teenager now than what it was when I was a teenager in the late 80s, early 90s.
Do you see any teenagers who they offend as teenagers? Do you see them come back as adults?
Yeah, and I've mentioned that I think to Alex briefly. We have had occasions, and you can almost tell it, because when I go into juvenile court, I can usually tell which kids made a mistake and their parents are on top of it and want to make sure it never happens again, and versus those kids where you come in there and the kid's made a mistake, but his parent, and usually it's one and not two, but sometimes two, will show up, and instead of helping the juvenile judge make sure that we do what's right for the child so it doesn't repeat it, they tend to want to decide with the child and try to fight any type of discipline or treatment or help. So you can almost, not in every case, but you can almost get a read on which kids you may have to deal with once they turn 18 as an adult. And does that happen? It absolutely happens, and I've seen a number of kids that I was afraid would not be able to change their behavior when they became adults, and they didn't, and they continued to commit offenses, and sometimes even more offenses. But the vast majority of juveniles get in trouble one time. The judge, the juvenile probation officer, the prosecutor, the parents, we work to come up with a solution to make sure whatever happened, isn't repeated. And I typically don't see them in the court system again. But every year there's a handful that I can pretty much count on having to deal with once they become an adult as well.
Since you have a family, how do you feel when you have cases involving families and children?
That's a good question. When I first started out, I guess I didn't have the perspective that I have now. I'm a little bit older, and like I said, I've got an 11-year-old son. So obviously, as you get older, you're going to gain more life experiences, and I think sometimes it might make me a little bit more aware of perhaps some issues that kids get involved with that maybe I didn't know fresh out of law school. So I think it has provided me a better perspective of some of the issues that young people face nowadays, where again, me growing up before the technology age, before the internet and cell phones and everything else, I didn't have to worry about. I think being a husband and a father has made me a better prosecutor. But I think some of that just comes with age too, and experiences. I've been doing this job now 19 years, and I've seen an awful lot. And as with anything, in any profession, you always try to learn from each experience you go through. But having a family, I think having a family helps that. And it also, I think probably more important to me personally, is it helps keeps me grounded, and it helps give me an outlet to get away from this job, because you can become so consumed with other people's problems, and that's what you're dealing with as a prosecutor. You're dealing with other people's problems, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's good to be able to go home and have somebody to talk to, somebody to to play with, somebody to go do things with, to get you away from the issues that you've spent the day working on.
So what are some difficulties of being a prosecutor in a rural area where you can sometimes know the people that are involved?
Oh, yeah. I can't go out anywhere in this community without knowing somebody that I've prosecuted, or having people come up and ask me questions about maybe their case or a relative's case or something like that. And I don't say that to dissuade people from coming and talking to me about their cases, but it's something that prosecutors in larger cities don't have to deal with. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm from this area. I have relatives all over this county. Sometimes I joke that I'm related to half the county. So I come from a big family on both sides. So it wasn't unexpected. And to date, I've really had very few bad experiences with people that I've prosecuted before and they come across in a public setting. Very, very few. Most of my experiences have been positive. One thing I sometimes find I get uncomfortable or feel bad about is I often have people come up and talk to me like they know me because they've served on a jury that I've conducted, or maybe they were a witness in a case, or they were a victim that I helped several years ago, and they know me, and I struggle with remembering their names, and that happens probably at least a couple times a month. So that's something. But again, that's part of the job, and that's just me feeling bad because I can't remember everybody's name.
So what would you say to someone wanting to pursue the prosecutor position?
Good luck. No. No, seriously, I would encourage them so long as they are under the understanding that this isn't an 8 to 4 or a 9 to 5 job, and it's sort of a way of life. I mean, as I mentioned before, I think it's the perfect fit for me, and I've enjoyed doing it for the last 19 years, but I would also be quick to say it's not for everybody. You are, as I mentioned earlier, if you're going to do this job, you have to go into it with the understanding that you are going to be dealing with other people's problems all the time, which again, that is fine, part of the job, but you're also on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, unless you're on vacation out of state. But I've had a couple instances as elected prosecutor where I've had to come back home from vacation because we've had homicides take place while I was gone. So you need to be devoted to the job. Now, I guess you could do this position without that type of devotion, but I don't think that you would last very long in the position. So you've got to understand that it's a way of life, but I think for me at least it's a rewarding way of life. I enjoy working with the courts. I enjoy working with law enforcement. I enjoy helping victims. Like I said, I enjoy making sure that people are following the rules. But I'd probably talk to the person and make sure that they understood what they were getting into, and make sure they understood that that they're going to have a certain level of dedication, and it's going to be more than just your typical 9 to 5 job, 5 days a week.
This has been Alec Roach and Brooklyn Franklin with Linton-Stockton Student Press, and we would like to thank Greene County Prosecutor Jarrod Holtsclaw for speaking with us again.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.